Sneedville. Remember this campaign? All right, Wargamers, I know we got a little bit distracted there in October with the D&D stuff and my buddies needing some help with their projects, but we're through it now. We can turn our attention back to Chuckville, formerly Sneedville. This is an Imaginations campaign that takes place in kind of the Quad State area. This is like Kentucky, mostly in eastern Tennessee, a little bit of Virginia, a little bit of the Carolinas, just a tip down here in one of the corners. And, we get distracted. We're wargamers. That's what we do. We tend to move from project to project, and we get distracted by the latest shiny. In fact, hey, let me show you my new system here. I like to make sure that I use all of my painted figures at least once. You know, they languish in the lead pile for a while. I get them out onto the paint table, and then I get them painted, and then what? They just go into the collection? We're not collectors here in the House of Wargaming, we're wargamers. So in order to make sure that I get at least a use out of all of my stuff, I put it on the shelf, which is right above my game table. So as I'm playing a game without them, they're staring at me, judging me, begging for use. So you can expect to see here pretty soon, we're going to do a video using our nice new Sarissa Precision houses. And I got some irregular miniature figures over here. It might be a little too small. Let me reach over and grab. What do we got? We got French and Indian War figures. Go ahead and focus on that guy, would you, camera? We got some British light infantry. And I also have some Native Americans back there. They're going to be doing some raiding. These houses are, we're going to need some burning tokens, I think. Anyway, see, here we go again. I'm a wargamer. I'm getting distracted by the next project. Let's talk about this project. Henry Hyde and William Sylvester are our Sherpas through the wild and woolly mountains of gaming. They are protecting us from the natives of there's no way to win at D&D and the blind alleys of failed campaign states. Fortunately, we are doing an Imaginations campaign. The nation of Knoxville is trying to defend its sovereign territory, specifically the town of Sneedville, right up here on the border of Knoxville and Kingsport territory. Kingsport is in the blue. Knoxville armies are in the red. Knoxville has thrown a wild end around through Big Stone Gap. It started to rain here in early October, so these guys are they're gonna wait for things to dry out. They're just kind of chilling and hanging. We just fought a battle over here, Battle of Parky Gap, in which the forces of Knoxville were thrown back. They tried to take Sneedville by force, and it just didn't happen. Somewhere right in here, they were defeated. Now, that happened on October 3rd. And on October 3rd, our other forces look a little something like this. The Army of the East for Knoxville is heading north to try to prevent Rogers' army from laying siege to Tazewell. Meanwhile, the Army of the West, the largest force in Knoxville's armed forces, has been kind of lingering back here in the backfield. They're just, not really motivated. They finally decided it's time to get in on the action. They're marching up from Jefferson City to relieve the siege of Morristown. Now, this Greens army is a fairly green army. A lot of young, untried troops. And these are the two battles we have to deal with today. October 3rd, the Battle of Parky Gap. On or about October 6th, we have both the Battle of 25 East and the Battle of, it's the Battle of, what is this? 25 East and the Battle of 11 East down here. So one is on the north side of Cherokee Lake, one is on the south side of Cherokee Lake. We are using real-world place names to inspire our armies. I haven't played a single battle in this. You, the viewers, have played every single battle. In this case, because we got distracted and we didn't really do as good a marketing job, we were so focused on the fate of Stormbringer, I have two contestants for this battle up here in the center portion of the map, and just one for the battle down here in the south. Now, the same guy did both battles. So what we're going to do, and you'll hear this again, since he did both battles, we're going to give him this one, but I'm going to tell you what the results were for him up here in the center. That's Napoleon 1066. Thank you so much for running these two battles for me. And then McMurray posted a battle report on Hex to Hex's channel, link in the description. So we're going to talk about that one first here in the center. We are going to start with the battle that never happened because it is very interesting. I really like what Napoleon 1066 did with this one. What you're looking at here is the morning of October 3rd. The sound of the guns echoes from off to the northwest as the Battle of Parky Gap is in full swing. The guys down here in Thornhill, the Army of the East, They probably can't hear it. They're probably a little too far away. The Rogers Army doesn't know what's going on up there either. They are still marching on Tazewell. And before we go any further, before we look at like orders of battle and all that, I want to kick things over to guernseybattles.blogspot.com so we can actually read through how this battle is fought out. This is the Battle of, and what he's calling Route 33. I really like what he did here. I'm going to read you directly from the blog. The ridges and hollers of this local area are filled with family clans that don't rightly like the armies of either side marching through their land. The local people have been working as watchers for the Army of the East and feeding news of where the enemy armies are located. This has allowed the Army of the East to have a good idea about where Rogers' army is at all times, but has caused quite a bit of trouble for Rogers' army. We've got partisans active here. And so what that means is, kicking back over here to this slide with Clinch River and Big Sycamore, the Army of the East is able to get over the Clinch River, hop over those ridges, and even get across the Big Sycamore to where that gap is before the Rogers Army realizes that they are in danger of being cut off from access to Chuckville. Remember that Chuckville, formerly Sneedville, is located off to the northwest along Route 33. So now, unfortunately, Rogers' army, because they were blinded, because their scouts were not active, they are forced to fight their way back down to the crossroads of 25 East and Route 33. This allows the army of the General Brock to take up a very advantageous position, blocking access to those crossroads, which is good because General Brock is outnumbered here. He's got one less regiment of foot. He is lacking any heavy artillery support, which makes this a very fair fight. Once again, we see the benefit of the natural progression of a campaign presenting battles that are surprisingly fair. This is one of those cases where each general has a pretty good expectation that he's got a good chance. If Commander Hurst can get his batteries into position and protect them, he may be able to blast the Knoxvilleans off those ridge lines. Let's find out what happens in this playthrough. And the long and short of it is it does not go well for the Army of Kingsport. This is what the tabletop looks like for the armies and the guys down here in the red coats. I think we might have had it backwards. Kingsport is on the kind of lower right-hand corner of this picture. And you can see the little ridge line in the hexes. That's where the Knoxvillians have set up their defensive lines. So what we're looking at here is Kingsport trying to force their way from the lower right to the upper left, and it doesn't go well. They are absolutely decimated. They are destroyed as a fighting force. They grind all day long, but by 4 p.m., it's pretty clear that the Kingsportians do not have the strength to force their way down onto Route 33. They surrender and they're eliminated. If Napoleon 1066, if we took a vote, this might be the final result, but it's not going to be. We're going to give Napoleon 1066 the other battle, and we're going to give this battle to McMurray over on Hex to Hex. Again, check the link in descriptions for that battle report, but I'm going to show you and I want you to go watch it. I want to feed viewers to that guy. Go follow Hex to Hex. He does some interesting things. As you can imagine, he does a lot of the gaming that's actually Hex to Hex. So we'll start with this snapshot showing where Knoxville is and where Kingsport is. McMurray said, listen, I'm going to draw out the battlefield. He set up the two ridges in the north and the south as we look at it. We've got a river down there in the very south edge of the battlefield, and we've got a road running through it. And he said, I'm just going to abstract all of the preliminary engagements, the scouting, the setting up the lines, and I'm going to give it an even chance that these guys fight, that they encounter each other along the road. And the dice came up, no, we're going to look at it lengthwise as we look at it. Now, had the dice come up otherwise, we might have had much shorter battle lines as the Kingsportians were coming in from the left and the Knoxvillians from the right. It would have been an entirely different battle. Be that as it may, we're going to cut to the chase. Look how good those lines look, too, by the way. 2mm figures, those are irregular. He has placed them on fatter bases for ease of handling. looks simply smashing. The two lines come together, and we've got, oh, look at that. The lines get ragged over the course of the day. Gaps open up. Look at all that white smoke. The smell of sulfur hangs heavy in the air. And in the end, the Knoxvillians are able to drive the King's Portions back. They win the fight, and they shove them back. They do tremendous casualties, except the King's Portions were able to get up on that ridgeline and secure enough space that, oh my goodness, the Knoxvillians are not able to drive them entirely from the field of battle. Having retreated to that point, the King's Portions hunker down. The Knoxvillians just don't have enough gas to run up the hill one more time, and instead, the hour's growing late, and they just pull back, and they just retreat back down the route that they came. So we're going to bring them back down across that river and allow the King's Portions to hike across. Now, that battle takes place on the 6th, and as we said, the weather gets worse. I think it takes place either on the 5th or the 6th. And what we're going to do is we're going to allow both of these armies to kind of get into winter quarters. On October 7th, the snows begin to fall, and fighting is going to cease in this area. Here's a good look at the casualties that result from that battle, and I haven't run the numbers yet. I'll have to take a look at these just in case these two armies want to go at it one more time. Remember, they've already fought once down in Morristown. The Knoxvillians won that fight. The King's Portions have won this fight. So it's 1-1, and maybe we'll have a third fight for all the marbles if the weather cooperates. But that is for next week in our game calendar. We still need to figure out what's happening this week down on the other side of Lake Cherokee. To that end, let's take a look at the strategic situation down there. What you're looking at here is the situation on or about October 4th. Commander Beeler of the Knoxvillians has a huge force. The Army of the West is the largest concentration of military might that Knoxville has in this theater of war. Commander Donahue is badly outnumbered. He does have quite a good number of scouts. He is able to keep track of where the Army of the West is, and he realizes right away, I would imagine that as they are digging the trench lines to begin the siege of Morristown, he gets word about exactly how big Commander Beeler's force is, and he says, you know what? I'm going to exercise the better part of valor. I'm going to find a defensive place to stand. And he pulls back to Bull's Gap. Now, they do control Bull's Gap, but he doesn't pull back through that ridgeline. You see the dark green kind of running through there? He says, no, I'm going to maintain Bull's Gap. If I need to, I want to be able to retreat down one of two different avenues. I want to be able to move to the northeast, or to the southeast down to I-81. I've got options. If I have to retreat to that larger ridgeline, I want to be able to do that. Not only that, but remember how this is working from a strategic standpoint. By pulling back a couple of days, he sucks the Army of the West further away from Lake Cherokee and further away from Chuckville. He's buying time for Old Man Winter, right? He's playing Russian general here. If General Winter can set in, then they win the fight. For his part, General Beeler has his orders, take care of Commander Donahue's force, take care of Green's army, and he does just that. So, 4th, 5th, 6th, basically on the 6th, as the rain begins to fall, the battle lines are drawn up looking a little something like this. And the King's Portions set their cavalry, heavy cavalry, on their right flank, thinking, man, if we can get around behind and cut off the Knoxvillians, we may be able to threaten them. We may be able to threaten their supplies. So we have a big cavalry fight there at about the Halo Disc Golf and Sports location. That cavalry fight lasts generally throughout the day. The blue lines that you see here, and I didn't track it by like cannons and foot and horse and all that. We have another classic example of just a couple of lines of troops, stretch them way out. They run at each other. You've got the Knoxvillians, the larger force, grinding their way uphill and just relying on the sheer weight of numbers and firepower to grind down their enemies. The table is going to look a little something like this, and we have a few more slides in this case. So as you can see, Kingsport is up there on the ridge, Knoxville is down here in the bottom part of the screen, and once again we're playing Command in colors with Lego dudes because they look awesome. They're a heck of a lot better looking than, you know, just a bunch of square blocks. Who wants to deal with the blockheads? And here we're looking at things from the King's Portions point of view. Looks like we're doing this at a club night. I wonder what the game is over there on the left. It's pretty cavalry heavy, whatever it is. At any rate, let's not get too distracted. A couple of more shots of the action. One more from the ridgeline looking down as the Knox villains are grinding. The bottom of the screen is south here, and it doesn't go well for the King's Portions. If we take a look at the casualties at the end of the day, now, once again, we have a case where the day grinds on, and in a battle of attrition, Knoxville wins this one. They are able to completely eliminate the Newport Rifles and the Irwin Dragoons as a fighting force. The Greenville line and the Jefferson City line have been decimated. They're down to half battle. Going to a lot now. I showed the arrow here that they retreated up the road. They're not. They control Bull's Gap. They're going to move into Bull's Gap on the 7th. But I'm guessing that, you know, as the day winds on, and it's pretty clear that the Knoxvilleans are not going to be able to drive Kingsport off that ridge, eventually, because they're just bleeding and hemorrhaging men, they pull back down, and they're going to pull back down to Morristown. You can see that of the casualties, they've completely lost the Maynardville Dragoons. Considerably heavy losses on the part of the Knoxvilleans, but they can afford those losses a little bit better than the King's Portions. However, the weather is getting increasingly worse. It's going to snow tomorrow. We're going to allow both of these armies to enter kind of winter quarters on the 7th. And then the next thing we need to do, and we're going to do that right now, we are going to take a look at what happens next as far as the weather is concerned. At the end of all of that, here is our final disposition of the forces. Rogers' army, victorious in battle, was able to get back onto Route 33 and is falling back to Sneedville when the snows set in. Normally what we've been doing is on the day after a battle, the forces have to rest and recuperate. I think in this case what we'll do, because heavy snowfall is going to block movement on the 7th, I think we're going to have everyone force march. We're going to be delivering additional casualties to all of these forces. It was already a grinding battle of attrition in both of these fights. The Battle of 25 East, the Battle of 11 East. We're going to add additional casualties, but we will allow each of these forces to find a final resting place somewhere, and the further you got to go, the more casualties you'll suffer. So Rogers' army has to fall back to the nearest, what would you call it? The nearest, like, safe harbor, which is Chuckville. So we're going to wind up, I think, combining both of these armies into one force. We'll have to run all of the numbers, but the last thing we need to talk about, and then again, this Greens army is able to retreat either to Middlesboro or Tazewell. I think, given the fact that this is a rather rough road, this is an improved road, this is essentially equivalent. The white lines are equivalent to marching cross country. In order to get back to Middlesboro, and they're actually going to be here at on the south side, this is Cumberland Gap. Very historical area, played a huge part in the American Civil War, largely for the reasons that we are experiencing with this campaign. This is a defender's paradise, and if you control Cumberland Gap, it don't take many guys, and you control it, and ain't nobody getting through. We are ignoring there's a tunnel punched through Middlesboro, but since this is a black powder kind of era, we've ignored that tunnel. So this is where the final disposition of the forces is. I still need to run the casualties, and I will be doing that, but before that, there's one last thing we need to do, and this is the moment we've all been waiting for. At the end of every week, we roll for what the special conditions are for next week. But I'm not going to do that in this case. Instead, what I'm going to do is check my weather chart. This little pegboard is how Henry Hyde does his weather. Kind of. This is how he recommends one way to do weather in his wonderful book, Wargaming Campaigns. So what you do, once you establish what the weather is like by rolling 2d6, you start your red peg on that result. Every day you roll 1d6, and on a 1 or a 2, you move to the left. On a 3 or a 4, you move nowhere, and on a 5 or a 6, you move to the right. So as long as you're in this center portion, you've got fair weather, and then we've got light rain, heavy rain, and a storm. Over here, we've got light rain and a fog. If you move off the end, I think you actually just circle back around to this side. Now that's great, except that is a single axis, and you have to make a new chart for whatever month you're in. Fortunately for us, William Sylvester gives us a year-long weather chart, and as you can see, he's got snow in the wintertime, with more chance of snow around the turn of the calendar year, and then much fairer weather in June and July. Today is October 7th, so I made a little note so I wouldn't forget. We are in this square here. Now today, we need to figure out what the weather is going to be like for October 8th and October 9th. On a result of a 1 or a 2, we move on to rain, and the campaign continues. On a result of a 3 or a 4, we have our second day of rain. Oh boy, now we're going to roll one more time. And if we get a 3 or a 4 here, we get our third day of snow, and Kingsport is our winner of the campaign with their forces secure right there in what shall henceforth be known as Chuckville. 3 days of snow, we're calling it here. They planned it perfectly. They did a blitz attack. They squatted on Sneedville. Now Chuckville. Knoxville was not able to mobilize their forces in time. The weather has gotten bad, and the armed forces are forced to go into winter quarters. Now we can go through and figure out what all the casualties are, and then relying again on the Solo Wargaming Guide, we could implement the reinforcements guidelines and bring some of these forces back up to snuff. But based on the decreasing participation among the viewers and my own distraction and moving on to bigger and better things, oh my lord, oh man, is December going to be wonderful. I have something amazing planned. I can't wait to share it with you. So we're gonna call it quits right here. We're gonna give ultimate victory to Kingsport. They just seized the initiative and they never let go. Knoxville got a little clever and they did their best, but the weather just wasn't cooperating. In this part of the country, 3 days of snow, the weather was unseasonably bad very early. It doesn't usually snow before Halloween in this neck of the woods, but it did today. And for a defensive set of terrain like this, that really is kind of a deal breaker and a game ender. It's definitely a game changer when you have to worry about the wet roads grinding everything to a halt. And it certainly ended this one in maybe with a bit of a whimper, but I don't think so, because in that last week we had 3 big set piece battles. And thank you once again to McMurray and to Napoleon 1066 and it was Charles Latorra and everybody that participated in this campaign. I had a great time. All of you that voted for the different strategies that these guys did, it wound up looking a little bit chaotic, but we found explanations for all of the kind of oddball decisions that resulted from our voting, and that's all right, because ultimately, at the end of the day, the goal was to have a linked series of battles that were developed naturally and organically based upon the field conditions and the real-world locations of these fights. Just a fascinating experience, and I'm glad y'all could come along for the ride and kind of push me along as well. Again, sorry that this took so long to get to, but hey, we get there. We get there eventually. Eventually, we'll get to the bottom of that lead pile, right? That's what we as war gamers do. Until next time, I'm praying for you.